Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. My name is Douglas Gabriel, and I'm with Michael McKibben today and Betsy Ross. Welcome. I'm mad today. I'm really mad. Now, as you know, I'm usually mad, but today I'm particularly mad because we are getting hit from every direction. There are bots being put into our computers that are updates from Microsoft on their little mechanical engine riding on their little microchip that they think that we don't know that they're controlling our computers. Well, they control everything about your computer. You ever notice that sometimes your computer will come on just for an update? How does it do that? That's because they're monitoring everything, and we have been asleep for a long time, and freedom of speech would be gone now if Hillary Clinton were the president, and Donald Trump is in an absolute pitched battle for the war of freedom of speech in this country, and soon he's going to have to take down Facebook, he's going to have to take down Google, YouTube, and all the rest of the social media because they have been used in every color revolution by George Soros, and they're being used now to attempt a coup d'etat. We have Mark Zuckerberg who comes before the Congress, and what does he tell us? That he's a complete idiot. He doesn't even know what code is. I don't think he could write a single line of code if his life depended upon it. He is nothing more than a cardboard cutout that was created by DARPA, Highlands Forum in QTEL, particularly in QTEL, and now Lidos. And so when Sheryl Sandberg comes before the Congress to testify, at least she's coming, the CEO of Facebook now refuses to come, and Mark Zuckerberg, why have him come? He doesn't know anything. He's a complete idiot, and he contradicts himself every time he opens his mouth. But here's what I'm really upset about. Australia put a $2 billion fine on them. Europe put multi-billion dollar fines on them. $8 billion in security suits against them in Europe alone. And what do we do here in America? Nothing. We're going to call Sheryl Sandberg. I like to call her Sheryl Bagman because she is nothing more than Larry Summers' Bagman. And she's going to come before Congress, and she doesn't know what she's talking about except to be another wicked warlord like Eric Schmidt. And we're going to talk about him in a minute. But Michael, you know more about the corruption of Sheryl Sandberg and the way that she's always been at the edge of corruption, particularly after they stole all your stuff from Leader Technologies and the IBM Eclipse Foundation. She was right there, but she was there from the beginning of the theft of your IP by Facebook. So would you tell us what is not going to be said when this wicked woman comes before the Congress to testify soon?
Well, I would like somebody in Congress to take a look at some of Hillary's emails that she refused to give to the State Department, because in there is specific evidence of Sheryl Sandberg's collusion, conspiracy with Hillary Clinton when she became Secretary of State to obstruct justice in our case, because we had a case against Facebook at that very time. And on the side, Hillary was cutting deals with Facebook, and specifically Sheryl Sandberg. There are specific emails where Hillary is inviting Sandberg to lunches, and Sandberg is inviting Hillary to lunches, all while our case is going on, and all while Mark Zuckerberg is stonewalling delivering any evidence of his 2003, 2004 time at Harvard that we had specifically asked for in the case, and that for a whole year the judge allowed Facebook to basically stall any kind of production. And then when it appeared that they were going to have to produce something, they switched law firms. The judge switched in the case, and we went to trial without looking at any of that evidence. And this was all while Sandberg is specifically colluding with Hillary on these contracts that you've talked about many times, where the State Department, Hillary, specifically contracted with Facebook to build a template for winning elections. And this started in 2009 and carried forward. So we have specific hard evidence of obstruction of justice by Sheryl Sandberg with Hillary Clinton and the State Department. I would like somebody in Congress to ask her specifically about that.
Oh, that would be wonderful. But then again, she's had so much collusion. That's the tip of the iceberg, but it's a wicked tip because it shows that she's always at the cutting edge of evil, no matter what it is, whether it's ripping off Russia through the World Bank with Larry Summers, whether it's going to Harvard and basically creating the fake Facebook and the fake social media movement, which basically stole your IP, your copyright, all the work that you did for Leader Technology. And she's always there. She's always there.
Well, why doesn't the public know about her?
She's always existed right below. She's always hid behind Zuckerberg, basically, and hid behind Larry Summers, and hid behind the feminist movement. And she puts herself out there as this big voice for women. And so she's got all these causes that nobody wants to touch. And so they don't touch her. She gets off scot-free and is paid big bucks to go around and spew these lies. But if you go back, hindsight's always 20/20. If you go back and look at her history, just look at her resume, and you will see that she is one of the kingpins of the deep state.
Can you explain more about that?
If you go back and look at, she was a student of Larry Summers in 1990 at Harvard in economics, and Summers was on her senior thesis advisory board. And then she wrote a book, or her paper was on, I've got the name, her paper was on economic factors and intimate violence, blaming domestic violence on traditional attitudes in Western society and patriarchy. And that was the project that Larry Summers helped her with. Well, then in 91, Summers was hired as chief economist for the World Bank, and during that time he specifically recommended the failed and disastrous Soviet voucher system, and two of his assistants in that project were Sheryl Sandberg, his former student, and Yuri Milner, who later went on to found Mail.ru and Digital Sky and vContact, and that was between 91 and 93. And if you recall history, in 92, George Soros crashed the United Kingdom pound, and in 95, the Highlands Group was formed, and in 99, and this is a real critical piece of this information, in 99, Sheryl Sandberg became chief of staff for Larry Summers when he was Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton. And she was only there from July of 99 through January of 2001. And during that time, we saw some very critical occurrences that now we look back and see were key projects that the deep state was working on to solidify everything we see now. Specifically, in July 14th of 99, Bill Clinton wrote an executive order 13130 called the National Infrastructure Assurance Council. And that was the precursor for the Patriot Act and for the IBM Eclipse Foundation and for all these different bodies that eventually organized all the illegal surveillance of American citizens. Then on September 29th of 1999, In-Q-Tel was formed. Now this is while she is chief of staff for Larry Summers. And then in November 12th of 1999, the Glass-Steagall Act for banking controls was abolished. So we see some very critical things that Sheryl Sandberg was specifically involved in. And then in 2000, the Plum Book, the famous SES Plum Book, was published.
Are you saying that she is an SES operative?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Well, it doesn't surprise me.
Well, let me just read you a few of the other names that were in that same book. I'll just go through them real quickly. Madeleine Albright, Sidney Blumenthal, Andrew Cuomo, Tim Geithner, Alan Greenspan, Eric Holder, Michael Horowitz, Patrick Kennedy, Jacob Lew, Bruce Lindsay, Joe Lockhart, Andrew Marshall, Robert McNamara, Robert Mueller, John Podesta, Janet Reno, Susan Rice, Larry Summers, Strove Talbot, George Tenet, Melanie Verveer, and Seth Waxman, just to name a few, all in the same Plum Book, along with Sheryl Sandberg. Okay, so then Bill Clinton leaves power. George Bush comes in. Sheryl Sandberg immediately goes and becomes vice president at Google, where she, in the next 3 years, developed Gmail. So she is responsible for Gmail. And during that same period, Doug Band created the Clinton Global Initiative, which we now all know a lot about. In 2004, she launched Gmail, and then in 2007, she invested with a number of Silicon Valley companies in Dropbox, which was backed by IBM, In-Q-Tel, and Larry Summers. Yeah.
Now, this is a lot of great information, so you're going to give me this so that I can provide it for our listeners to look at?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
You did know that. So,
yes.
Good, yes, you will. And so
I
it's
will.
going to be in that link. So, folks, you want to make sure that your congressperson gets this video, this audio, and all the information on Sandberg before her testimony in Congress.
Okay, so then she was pronounced on October 13th of 2008 by CNN to be a new Valley Girl, along with a number of other women that were put in senior positions with many of the Silicon Valley cutouts. We filed our lawsuit against Facebook on November 19th of 2008. On January 20th of 2009, Barack Obama was sworn in his first term. On his first day, he appointed Hillary Clinton to be Secretary of State, and within 3 months, Yuri Milner invested $200 million in Facebook.
Knowing by that time that they had already stolen your technology.
Right. Yeah, and then in July, May, June, July, just 3 months later, Sidney Blumenthal drafted Hillary's first speech to the Council on Foreign Relations, in which he specifically names Facebook as her new strategy for e-diplomacy around the planet.
So really, looking at the early beginnings of Sheryl Sandberg, we see that her hands are on this more than Zuckerberg's
Yes.
in weaponizing this against the citizens of the United States and really eventually of the world.
Well, Zuckerberg was a child when she was...
So she is the woman
Larry
behind the
Summers.
scenes that's doing all of this with her mentors, Larry Summers and Yuri Milner.
She is one of several. There's another one, Marnie L. Levine. But between Marnie L. Levine and Sheryl K. Sandberg, those are the two chief assistants for Larry Summers throughout this last 25 years.
So she sounds like a smart woman, so she'll be able to be very articulate in answering her questions, right, from these congressmen.
Well, she should be able to, but I imagine she's been well coached by these crooked attorneys that Facebook employs in spades, and I'm sure she's not going to recall really important things. She'll have to get back to you on that. I'll have to get back to you on that because it's very too difficult.
Oh, so you're going to be watching this and we'll be picking it apart later.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, so Sidney Blumenthal drafted a specific line, which I pulled out of the CFR speech. He said, "We must harness the power of new technologies and new means of connecting and communicating. Twitter and Facebook will become as much a part of diplomatic lexicon as cables and demarches." So that,
Mind you, what they're really saying is social media is the way to take down regimes.
yes,
That's what they're actually saying. They're saying that we have weaponized it. It's a psyops. Unfortunately, it's a bit out of control, and that really what Hillary is doing and what she did with her server in her house and all the other ones that were connected to it, what was she doing? She was basically running a Facebook e-diplomacy for anyone who wanted to see her emails. And now we find out that she was sending courtesy copies to the Chinese. That's the way that she planned it. She wanted to have complete transparency of evil as she took power. And then what would happen? She would have to take it over, turn it into a utility of the United States government, and then have complete and absolute control, as Eric Schmidt has gained control for President Xi in China with his totalitarian digital social, what do they call it, credit system. And they call it...
social credits, yeah.
Yeah, Dragonfly. And so what is happening in China is nothing more than a little bit advanced of what is happening here in America. As you notice now, they're arresting people in China for the look on their face. And now we are arresting people in America by facial identification. Simply the look on your face in China may indicate that you are going to commit a crime. So the police pull you over, take your phone, look at what sites you've been visiting, and if you've been visiting any sites they don't like, they simply arrest you. That's where we're headed.
Well, that brings up an interesting perspective on this next set of emails that came out of Hillary's private server that were first disclosed in FOIA requests to Judicial Watch. But in September 26th of 2009, and keep in mind, Zuckerberg is stalling all delivery of discovery in our case right at this moment. There's a contract, an email, and a contract that Hillary cut with Facebook, and their manager was Dmitry Shevelenko. It's GSA contract number SAQ MMA 09M1870 for $120,000. And Shevelenko specifically describes that contract as building a template for winning elections for Hillary Clinton and the State Department. So now we know from additional research recently that we coordinated with you that Lord Malik Brown was also paying to have the Leader Plus module added to the Avid ISIS teleprompter system for feeding information to the teleprompters on mainstream media election systems. And so what we see in that is, given what we now know, that pretty much anybody who paid the fee could see these emails, everybody on the planet that was coordinating with the deep state saw that Hillary was cutting deals with Facebook. So from a standpoint of our particular lawsuit, everyone on the planet knew we were going to lose that lawsuit. But they let us spend millions and millions of dollars on the lawsuit to go through the motions, just so they could keep up with their collusion. And then in January 21st of 2010, we also have another Hillary email, which shows that Sandberg and Zuckerberg assisted Hillary in drafting a speech on internet freedom to the museum in Washington, D.C. And there's exchanges back and forth where Sandberg is saying how much they enjoyed these emails were so syrupy and sappy in terms of the way.
How do you know that those emails exist?
They were given to Judicial Watch in Freedom of Information Act requests, so they were provided by the State Department.
Okay.
So these are evidence. This is evidence, I should say. And then in July 19th to 28th, we had our Facebook trial with Judge Leonard P. Stark, who we now know held massive amounts of Facebook financial interests, which he didn't disclose. So that essentially was fraud on the court in the lower court case. But even so, we proved that Facebook was using our invention on 11 of 11 claims. And then they fabricated evidence for some untested information, which Stark used to rule partially against us. Then on September 30th of 2010, there's another contract that Hillary cut for $265,000, GSA contract number SAQMMA 09M1870, another payment on this election winning template, also naming Russian Dmitry Shevelenko as the Facebook manager. We now know he went to India to have that information, have that software prepared. And then on February 16th of 2011, Facebook and Zuckerberg also assist Hillary again in writing a second speech on internet freedom to the museum. And she specifically wrote to Cheryl Mills, who was Hillary's chief of staff. She said, "We look forward to continuing to work together and supporting the secretary in this important work. On behalf of Mark Zuckerberg and myself, please give her our warmest congratulations." And she also mentions field testing elements of the framework in this email. This is indictable evidence, folks.
If you had a system that was operating under
If you had
the
a
law.
Department of Justice system that was paying attention to the facts and the law.
But they still they're still continuing. In fact, it's gotten worse. I mean, the reason that we're meeting in person today is because of what was going on in your computer. Can you
Right.
describe that just briefly before we move
Well,
ahead?
I am very, very meticulous about the security on my machine. And yesterday, Microsoft somehow reinstalled a telemetry program on my machine that slowed the machine down, but it was also sending information about my machine out to Microsoft. Finally got that off, and then we started to engage with you through Skype and found that every time we started the conversation, it was cut off, or the quality was so bad on your side that we had to finally give up and decide to meet together personally.
And so we'd like to know, anybody who's listening, if you're having the same issue, it'd be great to know. So just leave a comment.
Well, I guarantee you, the way that American conservatives are going to see their communication cut off is not directly. It's going to be through technical problems that nobody will be able to explain, and everybody will say, "Oh, we're sorry, but we'll get back to you. We'll check it out." And specifically, Microsoft is able to target individual machines, as the phone companies are, but it's especially true with PCs, because each of our computers has a specific address on the internet. And so Microsoft can read all of this exchange of telemetry, which is two-way communication between a machine and Microsoft servers, and dish up for an individual machine specific problems that person would then start having immediately as soon as that telemetry is gathered. And so I think that's what we'll see, and I would love to hear from other people as they have these problems.
Okay, so continuing on, it sounds like we've got another dog here.
Yeah, we do. In fact, also on February 16th of 2011, Sandberg invited Hillary to a complete off-the-record meeting in Silicon Valley called the Women of Silicon Valley, and it was a dinner meeting at Sandberg's home. So clearly Sandberg was conspiring, not colluding. Conspiring, that's illegal. Collusion is not illegal. Conspiring is illegal. She was conspiring with Hillary to rig elections, to obstruct justice in our case, to commit fraud on the court in our case, and that's just for starters, as you're talking about. We appealed on May 4th of 2011 to the Federal Circuit, and in the process, the judges involved in our case, Rader, Lori, Wallach, and one other, her name, missing her name for the moment. Anyway, they did not disclose their massive holdings in Facebook interests during the appeal. In June 29th of 2011, Larry Summers was appointed director of Andreessen Horowitz just before Facebook invested $1 billion to buy Instagram.
Another Horowitz? Related in any way to Michael?
I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't looked
we'll
that
let
up.
our listeners look that up for us.
Then March 27th of 2012, Hillary hosted a private dinner with Sandberg, Marnie Levine, and Cheryl Mills in Washington, D.C. at the Ricci restaurant. So the conspiracy to involve Facebook in massive election fraud and obstruction of justice is just off the charts. And what I'm referring to now is hard evidence provided by the State Department to Judicial Watch.
Crickets.
Yeah.
Which they now admit they do, by the way, and that's what they have been admitting. Yes, we do that. We support the Democrats. So what we need to do is we need to say every tiny support you give is an election donation. Otherwise, it's rigging the election, and they need to admit that they're Democratic and basically don't come on the site unless you wish to be manipulated into Democratic thinking. Far left thinking. Trump recently pointed out, put in Trump news, 96% of what comes up is negative. And so what's he doing? He's going to go after them. I think we'll talk about that once we get to see the picture.
I just heard on the radio this morning that somebody just did a test where they type idiot into Google, and page after page is nothing but pictures of Trump on the images.
And don't tell me that's not rigged. But, I want
right.
to push
They did
back
this.
on this Sheryl Sandberg thing. She just, not a pat on the hand, bad girl. This was a conspiracy.
Right.
This was an attempt to overthrow the United States government. Again, we are talking about a major crime where she should be immediately arrested.
Keep in mind, she's SES. She was chief of staff, a senior officer in our government when In-Q-Tel was formed, an illegal operation where a public agency is taking private money and forming a private organization. She was a part of abolishing Glass-Steagall, and she was involved with the setup of the agencies that ended up being part of the Patriot Act. So clearly she was a player and has been a player in the takedown of the American government ever since she was a student of Larry Summers in 1991.
But hiding behind the women cause.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm so tired of that. It's like the priests committing these horrific crimes against children, all the while hiding behind the papacy.
Correct.
They all need to be arrested.
Yep.
Whether they're women, priests, whoever they are, they conspire to overthrow the United States government.
And what they're blaming Trump for is complete ridiculousness. He didn't even sign the non-disclosure agreement with the whore that David Brock set him up with, and that's his election rigging? No, the election rigging of the dossier, the election rigging of the machines that run all on Optech, which your research has pointed out, the money that has been paid illegally for opposition research against Trump, the coup d'etat that was attempted even after he was elected, the Crossfire Hurricane, all of these things show that Hillary Clinton has been in bed with Robert Mueller, Rosenstein, Comey, Clintons, Bushes since the 70s. And it was all centered on technology because they could see that technology was the flow of money for the future, and they had to make sure they put their own personal tax on it.
You said Hillary, but as of 91, it also was Sheryl Sandberg.
Oh, of course.
It's almost like you can't keep the two apart. They've been floating right next to each other ever since Larry Summers got involved in this game.
I also noticed that every judge you mentioned basically is, what, do they just give them Facebook stock when they make them a judge? I mean, or how is it that every single judge in your case owns Facebook stock? Are they all just geniuses in investing, or how does that work?
And also, I want to talk a little bit, when you answer that, about Chief Justice John Roberts, who should be impeached for not disclosing his huge conflicts of interest.
Right, right. Roberts, I didn't mention, that was the last thing on my list. When we filed for the Supreme Court hearing, it's called a writ of certiorari, Roberts did not disclose that he also held massive amounts of Facebook interests. So, by the way, this was all prior to or right at the time of the Facebook IPO. So clearly what was going on is they were promising a big cash payday for all of these judges. And so you asked the question, how did they become geniuses? It's called insider information. It's not genius at all. It's called criminality. If you know something's going to happen, it doesn't take a genius to know I should probably get in on a deal.
And they had their eye on you for a long time, this group called the IBM Eclipse Foundation, which was run by a very crooked lawyer, from what I see. His name is James P. Chandler III. So they had their eye on you. Here you are, an entrepreneur, you've got a great idea, and they are like vultures just waiting to pick you off. But worse than that, after they picked you off, they weaponized this technology so they can pick off every single American in this country. And don't think it just stops here at our borders. It goes around the world. This is the digital tyranny that George Orwell could only have dreamt about.
Right, right. It's hindsight is a beautiful thing because you start to see how it all fits in context. But clearly, when I started seeking out a patent attorney in Washington to protect an idea that we all knew, our sixth sense was this was a big idea. And it was totally different than what IBM and Microsoft and Cisco were all doing. They were all doing something called groupware at the time. And when we came up with this way of handling scalable transactions in an internet environment, we knew it was important. But when we went and met with Chandler, he also knew it was important. What we didn't know and didn't get the memo is that he was the chief intellectual property advisor for these crooks, and for Clinton, and for Summers, and for the Highlands Forum, and for the NSA, and the CIA, and you name it. They were well into their plan to take over the internet and make it a weaponized tool for intelligence, in gathering information more cheaply, and for making money on it by these commercial entities.
Now, I don't want to slight Eric Schmidt, who put in hundreds of millions of dollars by coincidence into Facebook before it became public, or all of his investments in every other social media that was part of the IBM Eclipse Foundation, or the fact that these Silicon Valley cardboard cutouts all invested in each other's social media that then became smashing hits that actually became monopolies. I think that's kind of a coincidence. And then you got Uri Milner, who went off and basically took over Russia with the same technology. You got James Breyer, who went to China. You got James Chandler, who took it over in South America. You got people who went to Europe. And here, Sheryl stayed here to make sure that she could really get close to the Clintons and get right there in that rogue CIA White House so that she could make sure to continue Eric Schmidt's U.S. digital service investment of $1.5 billion to make sure that only Democrats get into the White House. I bet Sheryl is very upset that Hillary didn't get elected. But what I see here, and you've pointed it out so many times, the people who knew about this, including the judges, they're all insider traders.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is clearly the coin of the realm with all of these people in the senior executive service. When you are managing all the government agencies and you are listening to all the insider information and you are, now we know, reading all the congressmen's emails and all the senators' emails, you have insider information on everything. So what are you going to do with that? You're going to, what they did was they made a market in it. They took that information, they cut deals with various mutual funds. And this is a real key toward how they get around the financial disclosure laws, is they rewrote the disclosure laws so that you did not have to disclose the investments in the companies if they were inside a mutual fund. And then they rewrote the laws called de minimis rulings, where if you didn't hold a certain amount of that stock in these funds, then you didn't even have to worry about disclosing it. So in a mutual fund, which may have $50 or $100 billion worth of stocks in other companies, your stock investment, by comparison, is always going to be de minimis. So the game that all of these bureaucrats have played is they're all arguing the de minimis argument, that I don't have to disclose this because my investment of $50,000 or $100,000 in that mutual fund compared to how much JP Morgan stock there is in that fund is all de minimis in comparison by ratio. And so that's the game these lawyers are playing. It's all a lawyer game. And the accountants play along. The accountants know what's going on, but it's the lawyers who create the arguments. And they just tell their friends. So, okay, we're going to make a regulation in this particular market, and that's going to allow this company's stock to go up and these four to go down. So you use that information however you like to trade on that information.
Wasn't it Eric Schmidt who even got some kind of exception to the rules so that he could sell his stock very quickly after it went public and it went from millions to billions?
Well, the Facebook insiders, most of the Facebook insiders dumped their stock on day 3. If you recall that big fiasco with the NASDAQ, that was all contrived, of course, to create confusion. And then on day 3, when the stock market opened on Monday, they all dumped their stock at $38.65, I think it was, a share. And the insiders made about over $16 billion to their personal accounts on that day. And the SEC approved these insiders' ability to sell that stock on the third day. And it was humorous when I saw Kramer rail against Peter Thiel and selling, I can't remember how many he sold, but he was complaining about all these insiders selling their stock, which you're not supposed to be able to do unless you get an SEC variance, which these guys got in spades. So Zuckerberg sold, Excel Partners sold, James Breyer sold, Peter Thiel, Goldman Sachs, Microsoft, and a number of others.
And they're doing it again now. All these big tech lords, they're selling out their own stock and getting out. That must indicate something. I think we should talk about that later. But can you continue your story? I think you've remembered the corrupt lawyer whose name you couldn't pull up.
I do. Kimberly Moore was the Federal Circuit judge.
We want every one of them to be named.
Right. They all had massive amounts of Facebook interests. And then when somebody filed in that case to say, hey, these people have all this stock, it was completely ignored. And then, by the way, a year later, Randall Rader, the chief judge, was forced to resign on the bench for insider trading with one of the attorneys that was, in fact, involved with Facebook in other cases. So it's a very crooked bunch of people at the federal judicial level.
Okay, so now we're going to see Sheryl Sandberg testify in front of Congress. What do we expect out of it? What kind of questions would you want to be asked?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, with Zuckerberg, all he got were softball questions and a lot of pontificating by the various people up there. So, do I have high expectations? I don't. But if these congressmen were actually doing their jobs and actually representing us, then they should take this hard evidence that I've just raised from State Department documents and go right at her and say, were you conspiring with Hillary Clinton to rig elections?
There you go. We want these kinds of questions so that our listeners can then send that right to their congresspeople and demand that those kinds of questions be asked. What's another question that could be asked?
Did you obstruct justice in colluding? Did you, as a potential witness in the Leader v. Facebook case, obstruct justice by engaging in all these private deals with Hillary Clinton during the Leader v. Facebook case? Mm-hmm. And the answer is obviously yes, because we have the evidence. And so, see what she says. It's as simple as that.
What else would we want to do?
Well, I would like to ask her a very simple question. Sheryl, Bagman, did you take over $1 billion from George Soros recently and a donation from the Atlantic Council where you incorporated the same truth ministry that George Soros has taken over the European Union with, which is the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Laboratory? And when she has to answer yes, because you can quote the date and the amount and the time and how much of it came through the Atlantic Council, which is, by the way, that means that Dmitry Alperovitch, the very person, the Russian spy who is a CIA agent, the only person ever allowed to look at the Democratic National Committee server, he is now in control, Sheryl Sandberg, of Facebook. Do you admit that or you do not admit that? And she would have to admit that because, of course, she has a contract with them. And that contract is doing the same thing that Hillary was doing before. This time, instead of using a GSA government contract from the State Department to hire a Russian agent to work from India to hack our elections by using Facebook and also Google to manipulate the election, they now are doing it, but they're almost proud of it. Zuckerberg came out and said, I'm going to do whatever I want. And he knew nothing was going to happen because what you just explained. How many Congress people, senators, judges, and the globalists have money invested in FANG, in the big tech cardboard cutouts, which all were stolen, were basically taken from IBM Eclipse Foundation, which stole your materials. What's happening with those groups? What is really happening is another election rigging on a larger scale than it was the last time. And they've come out and basically said they're practically proud of it. Remember what happened when Zuckerberg testified? They immediately changed their user agreement, which was, over 600 pages long? Now it's even longer. And now they can do anything that they want, and they make it even more specific. And basically, if you don't like it, tough luck. Lawsuits all over the world against Facebook for their privacy theft, but not in America. Why?
Their
because
stock prices keep going up.
They just keep on going. You just explained it to us, Mr. McKibben.
A lot of dirty money out there looking for a home.
I want to just, for a moment, let's talk about the U.S. Digital Service. Explain that to our listeners. What is that, Michael?
That is a project that started as the, quote, Eric Schmidt project in the preparation for Hillary's 2016 campaign. and it was started in the Obama White House in 2015. The reason we know this is there are a number of WikiLeaks disclosures that show their correspondence that Robbie Mook, her chief of staff, and John Podesta and Cheryl Mills were all having around getting Eric Schmidt to fund the campaign for re-election for Hillary Clinton. And so they started out as a brainstorming session. You can see it from the emails. And then at some point Schmidt picked up on it and actually came back and proposed, and the proposals in the WikiLeaks, proposed a $1.5 billion funding. I mean, I'm not talking million, I'm talking about billion. That's a lot of money. And he proposed to start this project in 2015 and end it 2 weeks after the 2016 election.
And the purpose of the project was
to get Hillary elected.
Okay, they failed.
Yes, they did.
But it wasn't without a lot of effort. What was Sheryl Sandberg's role in that?
Well, when you have $1.5 billion, you can build a lot of infrastructure, and I'm sure that did not go away at the end of the campaign.
Oh, so it's still active. It's just.
Well, I personally think it's in that bunker that Valerie Jarrett's running down from the White House about 2 miles.
It's the new alphabet. Because what they did is they digitized every single service in the military and every corporate one that they could. They stole every bit of information they could from the credit agencies.
Right. They were profiling voters.
Exactly. Now they steal all the information from your banks. And where are they putting it? Where we told you they're putting it. Eric Schmidt's alphabet and his profile for you. We call it the digital box they're going to put you in. And it will be soon, folks, because if they win this midterm election enough that they can try to impeach Trump and, again, obstruct the good work that he's doing, then it is just going to go south from there. You're going to see America become what China has now become. And notice, since the moment that we told you that Eric Schmidt had escaped and gone into North Korea and then into China, he hasn't shown up again for any meeting anywhere, and they're not calling Eric Schmidt before the Congress. And anyway, congressional hearings, they don't do anything. Nobody's going to be indicted. Nobody is going to even be subpoenaed to testify. Here's what should be happening. If Richard Burr actually was a man instead of an animal of some sort who is, I guess, after his only self-interest and his self-aggrandizement, because the Intelligence Committee should be bringing these people like Google and YouTube and Facebook and all the social media people, Twitter, who are, in fact, squelching free speech.
Douglas, I need to interrupt you. You know that's never going to happen. Why? Because Eric Schmidt has all the dirt on everyone.
That's exactly right. And
all
that's
of
what
them
we
on
forget.
everyone, and he is using that as blackmail. He will never be brought to justice in this environment unless we see some miracles coming out of the White House, it seems to me.
And Eric Schmidt's $1.5 billion investment connected to a huge investment that we the people paid for that digitized everything and connected to that and then went straight to the bunker where Valerie Jarrett is still.
Well, let me add a few more pieces to the story of 2015 because all of this is described in these emails. But what happened is after they started, they renamed it the U.S. Digital Service. They gave it a logo. The White House, with great fanfare, announced it on their website. And at the same time, Barack Obama took his chief technology officer, Todd Y. Park, and sent him out to California on the payroll of the U.S. taxpayer to run Hillary's digital operation at Facebook. And then at the same time, Eric Schmidt sent Mikey Dickerson to the White House to actually have an office at the White House to run the U.S. Digital Service out of the White House. The U.S. Digital Service was also connected to the Federal Election Commission through another organization parallel to this called 18F. And between those organizations, they were uniting all the databases that these various companies had, and they were discussing, Eric Schmidt was specifically discussing getting all this data collected together so they could better target the voters for the next election. Well, this all feeds right into that template for winning elections, and now we know from the Avid teleprompter system that what they were doing was unifying the ability to micro-target individuals through various social and TV media, and to basically push psychological operations and memes and whatever it would take to trigger that person to move left or move wherever they wanted them to move in the next election. So, as you point out, they lost.
They spied.
Even with all that money.
They targeted. They attacked. They lost. They had $76 million from the Global Engagement Center. They had an entire Obama federal administration on Hillary's side. They had all 17 intelligence agencies on Hillary's side. They had corrupt Fusion GPS. They had every corrupt person you can imagine working for Hillary so that Hillary could then take over America complete and finish the death of the republic. And it was being done through technology. And the problem is it's still being done through technology. And the very people who should be looking into it, the intelligence committees of the Senate and of the Congress, they are as corrupt as anybody you can imagine. I mean, if you take Adam Schiff, he got involved trying to get dirt on Trump himself from Russian spies on telephone, okay? You have Mark Warner, who was working with Christopher Steele directly, and Bruce Orr, and McCain's right-hand man, Henry Kerner, who we now know was directly hooking up Russian spies to the Democratic National Committee so that they could try to frame Trump. And this just went on from, it actually, we now know, started in July of 2015. We pointed out that it started getting a lot of steam in December of 2015 when the DNC realized that they had been severely breached because the part that they really didn't like wasn't Hillary's server. Everyone got a courtesy message, a courtesy copy of every one of her emails as long as you paid to play. No, they were afraid of the messages from George Soros that was telling John Podesta and Hillary and Donna Brazile how to run the campaign. And they had a very specialized system created for them by Strategic Communications Laboratory, Lord Malik Brown, and others in the Privy Council that showed them exactly how to target the people that they wanted to. And then they used Facebook, YouTube, and Google, and the algorithms that then pointed you in the opposite direction that you wanted to go. So there were, and this was admitted by the guy who was appointed by Obama as the head of the Global Engagement Center. He said that's what they did. That's what they did during the election. They could target entire groups of Americans and say, give me this demographic, target them, spy on them. Yep, that's who we want. Now let's hit them with what we want. That was going on. We have yet to see any of that evidence because that was covered up by Mueller. What we got to see is 25 fake Russians and a bunch of nonsense, all in Russian, that was supposedly affecting our election. It was never even translated. How could it have affected our election? So we get to see the opposite. And the opposite usually points in the direct place that we're supposed to be looking. So when those intelligence committees aren't doing their job and they're interviewing Sheryl Sandberg, a person who's as guilty as anybody of literally crimes, huge crimes, they're not going to do anything with that. The wrong people are asking the questions, and they're in the wrong committee, and they need to be arrested by FBI agents working under the direction of the Department of Justice, and then queried and simply ask the questions that are in your timeline that show all of their crimes and just say, were you here on this date? Did you do this? Okay, that's a crime. Check. Were you here? Did you do this on this date with Hillary? Yes. Okay, check. That's a crime. That's all that needs to happen. It's not going to happen until we have an honest DOJ and an honest FBI and honest CIA, which until the Clintons get out of the mix and until that type of corruption leaves, because they went right back to the beginning of the corruption that stole the patents, your patents included, that controlled information because they knew we were going into a giant information war. And they knew that if they couldn't control the information and if free speech was allowed, then they would not be able to do something as bold as put Hillary as a paid position on the board of Walmart after bringing the Chinese in illegally to give infinite support to Sam Walton to create Walmart in Arkansas. No one seems to notice the self-enrichment of these people because the mainstream media is controlled in an information war, and we now know it's exactly who it is because of the good research you've done and your other friends concerning Avid, ISIS management, Leader Plus, or whatever they're going to call it in the next election. It is an information war, and it seems as if no one in D.C. besides Donald Trump is even aware of it, and he seems to be winning the war.
Well, I think they are aware of it. I think they're compromised. And so they're doing everything they can to cover their butts and also protect their investments. So the good news is none of them want the market to crash because they've all got at least part of their funds in mutual funds. So there's always an interesting mix of good and bad in all these conspiracies. But bottom line is we need to go back to the Constitution because we've gotten far away from it. Lying has become the coin of the realm, and unfortunately we are now accepting lies and not holding people accountable for lies. You know, when you lie in a court, that's called fraud on the court technically, but from what I can tell, lawyers and judges do it just like they're drinking water. They just lie all the time. You know, an attorney misses a filing, he just makes up a lie for why he missed it, and the judge says, okay. They never check. So there's this culture of lying that we've got to stop. We've got to get back to the Constitution.
We're in the post-truth age, the age of falsehood politics, and when they tell you that they can't go into an iPhone and break the code because a criminal has a code there, or because we can't do it because we don't have the right to do it, those are all lies.
Right.
We saw it in Iran, we see it in Syria, we saw it in Turkey, we've seen it in China on a huge scale. Anytime they want, they can turn off every single radical Islamic fascist site in the world tomorrow. That's no problem. Anonymous has shown that. One day they said, if you don't do it, if the CIA doesn't do this, we're going to turn off 10,000 sites tomorrow that are all directly connected to ISIS. And they did. It is being run by the very people who are using it as a weapon against us. And it's been used, social media has been used against many, many countries. 14 color revolutions George Soros has participated in. The last half dozen or so, it was social media. And it was so easy to run the Orange Revolution in Ukraine or the Euromaidan Revolution there, simply because of social media wasn't cut off. Why? Because the rogue CIA was running that color revolution.
You want me to give you an idea how simple it is to fix this problem?
Please do.
The system you're describing is what was built with our technology, but that wasn't the basic design of our technology. The basic design of our technology assumed that we wanted to protect privacy and security. And so your property is yours, mine's mine, and Tyla's hers. The easy rule to re-implement with our platform is this. If you host the group that's having a discussion on the web, you own that data. It's not mine, it's not the hosts, it's not the ISPs, it's not the telephone companies, it's not the NSA. It's yours. That's the basis of our Constitution. We had a revolution over illegal search and seizure of people's private property, right? We had a whole revolution. Now we've got a problem that's 1,000 times, 10,000 times worse, and yet we're letting it happen this time. We've got to stop that. So if you host it, you own it. That's the rule. And you can set the rules for your group.
So you're saying if you have a Facebook page,
yes.
That's your Facebook page.
Yes.
Facebook has nothing to do with it. All they are is a utility,
right,
allowing a line of communication. Like if I pick up the telephone, I can talk to Aunt Sue,
right,
and I don't have to worry about AT&T coming in and go, no, you can't tell Aunt Sue that.
Correct.
Nope, hanging up on me. No. So Facebook is merely a utility, and can it function once this reset has happened?
Yes, it can.
Okay, and you can keep your Facebook page?
Yes.
And you don't have to lose anything.
No.
Right? How about YouTube? And the same thing.
Same
this is my
thing.
YouTube
It's all the
channel.
same technology, by
I
the way.
control it. I control the comments that come in. I
Right.
can decide if I want to delete something or not. If I put something up that is illegal, then I expect that there would be a law enforcement group that would come and take care of whatever I put up that was illegal.
That's correct. Let the courts do their job.
Not YouTube.
Right.
YouTube is, once again, is a channel for communication. It's not the overseer of what I have to say. I want to see this implemented sooner than later. Now, are you folks
It
at
can
Leader
be.
Technologies ready to step up to the plate to help us move into this new way, that's the way it should have been done in the first place?
Absolutely.
Okay, what would that take? How long would that take to shut these thieves, these thugs, these criminals down and move everything to we the people?
6 months to a year.
Okay, all right. So, folks, that's your call to action. Get out and get the word out. We drove today because the computers weren't working. We had to drive to meet each other to have this conversation, to share with you good patriots. The least you can do now is to go and share it with others. You don't even have to get out of your house to do it. Just share it digitally.
You know, the issue is net neutrality. We tried to point this out to people. Net neutrality meant that these corporations could manipulate anything they want, use whatever bandwidth they want, and even if they used 85% of the bandwidth, they weren't charged anything more than I'm charged. And then what is the issue here? Net neutrality was about who is responsible for what is broadcast and who can censor. That's what is going on.
Right.
Net neutrality, if we go back to net neutrality, we go back to allowing what we see has been the case. When we got off of net neutrality, then it became the government's responsibility. Why? 45% of every line that this stuff is going across on the internet was paid for by we the people. It is a utility, whether we want to admit it or not. It was a supported, government-supported monopoly, and so is Amazon, and so is Google, and so is Facebook, and so is Twitter. All of them are, because they do not pay for the usage of the things that we the people built for them. And even with the companies that Sprint and AT&T, they don't own those lines. They own part of the lines. And so these companies can be shut down very, very easily. All you have to do is say to Facebook, I'm sorry, you get no more government contracts, you get no more supplemental money. It'd be like Elon Musk if he didn't receive any more supplemental funds, which he's receiving in some categories, the majority of all the funds given out by America for research, he would close. And the same thing would happen if we simply charged AT&T and Sprint and Verizon for the lines that we paid for. They would close. All those companies would close.
Well, we're proposing a license because you can't have people inventing. You can't enable inventors to invent and people to be creative if you don't reward them for the creativity. So we've got to get back to our intellectual property laws before they were seized by Serco and by this crowd. And then we need to have everyone pay a reasonable fee, fair across the board. That will fund the hardware layer, the actual wires and the computers, and then the software layer, the operating systems like social networking and others. And then the data that you put on there is yours. If you host it, you own it. It's that simple. If you host it, you own it.
Unfortunately, right now, our CIA memory are basically what is being hosted by Amazon, what is being hosted by Facebook, DoD memory in the clouds. What you just said is the perfect example of why we need to close it down. Facebook and Amazon own our most sensitive information. They do, because it's in their cloud. It's in their cloud computing.
Their user license agreements have very cleverly, lawyerly rewritten the whole concept of data ownership, where they start out their user license agreement saying, you own all your data. Sentence 1. Sentence 2, you let us have a copy. That's sentence 2. So in effect, you've given all of your information away in the very user license agreement you click through when you go onto the web.
So as soon as Trump signs that Miller Act check to Leaders Technology, the ball would start to roll to end this surveillance, this spying, this targeting, this attacking, this weaponized psyops that people try to say came from geniuses in Silicon Valley, from young geniuses, when in fact we know it came from hardworking geniuses from Columbus, Ohio,
Correct.
Michael McKibben and Leader Technologies.